In what is now considered one of the most horrific incidents in the history of love and hip-hop, cameras caught Kirk Frost having a violent outburst that left Rasheeda crying and everyone in shock just hours after it was leaked. The video is already going viral on social media, with fans demanding explanations and producers desperately trying to control the story, but the damage may already be done. It all happened on what should have been just another scene between the longtime couple during a normal filming day, but something broke. They raised their voices, accusations were made, and in a mood. The Love and Hip Hop set was busy with the usual control chaos, cameras in place, helpers running around with makeup, and Kirk sprang at Rasheeda in a way that nobody had expected from the man she had stood by for years. Fans are now wondering what actually happened behind the scenes, and whether this was an isolated incident or a sign of something much more sinister. Although Rasheeda has not made any public statements, friends and family believe she is devastated and done. VH1 insiders say this controversy could jeopardize not just Kirk's career, but the entire series. The audience was unaware that Kirk had found text on Rasheeda's phone just before the cameras started rolling. They were private, with her ranting to a friend about Kirk's most recent betrayal, but they weren't flirtatious or scandalous. Rita was doing last-minute touch-ups under the blinding glare of the production lights, her taut face and clenched jaw that seemed to be holding back a storm. Anyone who knew Rita could see the emotion simmering just beneath the surface as she sat in the corner trying to remain composed while looking through her phone. The entire crew could sense the cold energy between them. "I don't know how much longer I can pretend this marriage is okay," she had written. Kirk saw it, but he didn't say anything. He simply waited for the scene to begin after walking to his assigned spot on the set, but he was boiling inside. They were supposed to film a simple sequence, a conversation about their son's academic situation, but Kirk couldn't fake it. When the director called for action, he went on a diet instead of following the script. "So that's your true feelings driving me behind my back?" Rita looked up, startled, and her voice was already breaking as she asked, "What are you discussing?" The director tried to cut the scene at this point, indicating a pause, but Kirk persisted. "I saw everything and moved in her direction, uncertain if it was simply dramatic acting or actual life playing out in front of them." The crew paused, the air felt heavy, and there was a lot of stress. Rosita's eyes widened as you looked over my phone, and Kirk yelled, "Don't pretend you're innocent. You've been grinning in my face while disparaging me. That isn't real, Rita, and I've had enough of false." His emotions had taken over. "I have to vent to someone, Kirk," Rita said, getting to her feet with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. "I can no longer contain all of this. You're never present, you tell lies, you are dishonest, and I am simply drowning." Kirk was pushed over the edge by those remarks, and in a single quick motion, he lifted his hand. No one could have predicted what happened next, as everyone watched in what seemed like slow motion as his palm made contact with Rita's cheek. The studio echoed with the sharp slap, and the air was filled with the sound. A clipboard was dropped. Rita's face turned away, and she stood stunned and motionless. One hand slowly rose to touch the spot where he had struck her, and then everything exploded. Security cried, the assistant director rushed forward, and one of the sound technicians hurried over to Rosita and gently led her away. Kirk just stood there, panting, looking as though he was still in shock at what he had just done. But it was done, and it couldn't be undone. The cameras continued to record out of surprise, not on purpose, and the footage was shot from a variety of perspectives. Kirk Frost, a longtime cast member, was captured on camera hitting his wife in a moment that would go down in history. Word spread like wildfire off the set after someone received a negative message from a crew member. In a matter of minutes, social media exploded after Kirk struck Rita, and when she was taken to her dressing room, his name was already well known. Fans couldn't believe what they were hearing, and nobody wanted to accept it, but the words kept coming in. Everyone had a different version of events, and none of them gave Kirk a positive portrayal. Meanwhile, Rena sat. The producers were in a panic outside the door, unable to agree on what to do. Some wanted the entire shoot to be stopped, while others said they had to make a comment before the video was leaked. Her cheek was already flushed and her makeup was smudged, but she refrained from crying anymore. Instead, there was only astonishment, treachery, and a strange sense of relief, as though something that had been hidden for too long had finally surfaced. "He really did it," she muttered to her stylist. "He struck me hard right in front of everyone." That this would not remain confidential because it had already been captured on a phone recording that the hazy foam film would be the first thing to go online, even though the network's cameras had captured it in excellent resolution. Kirk, on the other hand, had left the set without offering an apology or explanation, just leaving behind a rigid stance and an incomprehensible expression. He didn't speak to anyone, not even his supervisor. He just got into his car and drove off. The first footage appeared online the next morning, and it was immediately followed by Kirk Frost slapping Rasheeda. Fans were incensed. Celebrities started to voice their opinions, demanding that he be fired, arrested, or canceled. One rapper wrote on social media, "Not a single apology, simply repulsive. I grew up watching them." Another R&B singer posted, "I'm heartbroken now." Even Mama Scott, the show's executive producer, couldn't keep quiet, saying, "Violence has no place in our production." Rasheeda stayed silent the entire time, but it was brief. A few hours later, she posted a single image to Instagram with a black screen without a caption, but her fans showered her with support in the comment section. "You are loved by us. Go away from him. You're worthy of better." In a vague but clearly targeted post, they're making decisions. Rumors circulated that Kirk had received an indefinite suspension, while others claimed that VH1 was considering canceling the entire season. The outside world was unaware of this humiliation, rage, heartache, and misunderstanding, and Rasheeda wasn't sure if she wanted to file charges or stay married. Everything had changed, and that was all she knew for herself and everyone around her. This was only the beginning, as the events on that set were only a small part of a much darker, bigger drama that had been simmering for years behind closed doors. And now that the truth was out in the open, there was no turning back. There was a brief period of silence behind the scenes while the world waited for Rasheeda to speak, and the damage was much more severe than anyone could have imagined. In addition to bruising her cheek, Kirk's slap destroyed years of devotion, trust, and silent compromise. They had previously been filmed fighting, and they had witnessed infidelity scandals, constant rumors, and emotional collapses. But this was different. It was difficult to ignore the unadulterated violence that was captured on camera in real time. It seemed as though everything she had been hiding for years had now been made public, and it hurt even more because her phone kept buzzing with messages from cast members, friends, and family. Some were shocked, but too few acknowledged that they weren't shocked. Her team advised her to take time to recover and avoid social media and the media, but recovery wasn't imminent. Instead, memories flooded back of the multiple times she had overlooked, protected, and forgiven Kirk, even though she knew deep down that he wasn't deserving. For what length of time had she been hoping for things to improve? Rasheeda stared at that text for minutes. How many times had she told herself that remaining was what love meant? Kirk was lying low across town, hiding away from the cameras and the mayhem at a friend's condo. He hadn't called Rasheeda and hadn't apologized in any way. Instead, he kept replaying the incident in his mind, trying to make sense of it and turn it into a positive thing. Response rather than an attack, he informed himself that she had provoked him, that it was just a mistake, but that no matter how many times he tried to rephrase it, he had gone too far and was unable to turn back. His phone rang, and Scott was the one who didn't answer. Then it rang again, and then a text message came in saying, "We need to talk. This is a serious matter." Kirk paced the room, throwing the phone aside, knowing that the network would be watching, that the video would be reviewed, that legal counsel would be consulted, that statements would be prepared, and that his reputation, what little was left, was quickly eroding. Insiders interviewed by podcast hosts suggested that Kirk had previously become combative off camera during all of this. Meanwhile, the internet had exploded, with fans unearthing old videos of Kirk disparaging Rita and analyzing his tone, body language, and previous arguments for hours. Hashtags like #FireKirkFrost and #JusticeFor was popular. News outlets reported the story as a reality TV scandal turned real-life tragedy, and a panel discussed whether VH1 should terminate his contract. Back and was renowned for fiercely defending her daughter. Her eyes were burning as she said, during an impromptu live session, "You can't build love on pain. I told her years ago, and now have a peek." He touched her with his hands, and her words resonated on social media like a rallying cry, with supporters swarming around her, extolling her fortitude, and characterizing her as the voice that was desperately needed at the moment. Rita watched the video in silence, crying because she knew it was true, not because of what her mother had said. She had ignored the warnings, her intuition, and the restless. The network released a statement the following day that read, "The Kirk and Rasheeda Frost incident is known to VH1. We do not support any kind of violence. We're taking action to protect our cast's health and safety." It was ambiguous, secure corporate. Fans questioned why she hesitated, but something inside of her refused to give up. Maybe it was love or fear, or maybe she didn't know who she was without Kirk after all the years of standing up for him. But they weren't pleased, so they demanded that Kirk be removed for good. The executives were in a difficult situation, and Kirk finally spoke up despite the storm with a poor video that was posted to the story. His voice was defensive as he began, and people only saw what the camera showed. Because every story has two sides, things went out of control. "I regret what happened, and I love my wife, but the damage was already done." Most of the comments were angry. One admirer wrote, "You didn't apologize." Someone else said, "We witnessed the slap. You were just trying to look good. We witnessed the terror. Don't deceive us." Reed didn't respond in public, but behind closed doors, she was preparing for a lawyer to discuss her options instead of suing Kirk. Divorce was a possibility, so she was removing herself from the show entirely because she was tired of carrying a story that had become a. As the days passed, however, another twist emerged. Raw, unedited footage from before the slap was made public showed Kirk pacing angrily backstage and muttering to himself, "I'm done playing the good guy, and she's going to learn today." This revelation confirmed the fans' suspicions that the smack was not an unplanned outburst, but rather had been planned long before the cameras caught him spinning. Everything changed after this realization, and even the cast members who had tried to support Kirk turned their backs on one another. To lessen his appearance, producers began re-editing episodes, and there were rumors that he would be completely removed from future plots. Rita was mostly silent throughout it all, but her strength began to show in different ways. She streamed live from her store while laughing with the staff and smiling as she shared pictures of herself with her children, and she never once spoke to Kirk, but her message was clear that she wasn't damaged, not now. However, there were still questions about whether she would return to the show, whether she would openly confront Kirk, or whether she was going to leave for good. Once a prominent figure in hip-hop and love was left feeling abandoned, rejected, and unsure of whether his empire would survive the fallout, and this was just the beginning. Raza's silence became more noticeable as the dust was beginning to settle, and every tweet she sent without Kirk was taken as a declaration without him. However, beneath those brief moments of strength, there was a woman still coming to terms with the betrayal of a lifetime. Fans admired her strength, but they were oblivious to the times she cried alone, questioned every decision she made, or nearly called him but restrained herself. Meanwhile, Kirk's situation was becoming worse. Kirk was being obliterated piece by piece, and no one was publicly defending him. However, he wasn't particularly hurt by the media criticism or the company losses because Rita's silence was the cause. He had expected her to strike out, possibly even going live and shouting his name into thin air, but she didn't. Instead, she just continued, and that felt worse somehow because she was no longer upset. Sooner than he could handle, all of the footage that featured him had been stopped by the network companies that had previously supported him and began to withdraw. She had finished Kirk, but he couldn't let go so easily. In an attempt to change the course of events, he pleaded for a sit-down with one of the show's producers. He wanted to explain his position before they banned him for good. The producer wasn't sure that there were risks, but drama was lucrative, and Kirk was the epitome of drama. Desperate, unfiltered, and rejected, the cameras rolled again a few days later, but this time in a studio that was closed under the lights. Kirk sat with sweat on his forehead as he began. His voice broke as he said, "I grew up in a chaotic environment. I never observed a relationship that was healthy. Perhaps that's why I make so many mistakes, and I may have messed up with Rasheeda for that reason." He dabbed at his face, but I never imagined it would progress this far. The video's goal was damage control, but viewers were able to see through his statements and called it performative manipulation when another attempt to avoid responsibility, albeit not in the way Kirk had wanted, went viral, with one fan posting on social media, "I'm not sorry for what I did." Kirk's oldest daughter from a previous relationship stated in a mystery tweet, "He's been like this. You're only now learning about it." It was akin to unleashing a torrent. At the same time, a new voice that no one had expected emerged into the maelstrom. Each new revelation felt like a puzzle piece that Rita was not aware was being put together, as other family members, an ex-friend, and even a former romantic partner came forward to disclose years of emotional instability, control issues, and poisonous behavior that had been too long hidden behind the cameras. As Kirk's reputation burned to ashes, producers met in secret to discuss turning the drama into a special episode. The idea would bring Rita and Kirk together for a live televised altercation. The viewership would be enormous, and there would be no stopping the buzz. The problem was that Rita didn't want anything to do with it. Her team instantly denied her request because she wasn't prepared and didn't want to give Kirk a chance to turn his life around. Nevertheless, the way Kirk always managed to shift the responsibility began to make sense. She had carried shame that wasn't hers for years, and she was now putting it down one piece at a time. Producers wouldn't budge, so they reached out to me again with an offer of full editing rights, creative control, and a substantial payment. Rita felt torn between wanting to keep quiet and knowing that this might be the last chapter in her life, a chance to end the book the way she wanted. She debated for days before agreeing, but with the caveat that Kirk wouldn't know about her agreement until the filming was finished. Kirk arrived on set expecting a solo segment, and on the day of filming, he mentally rehearsed sentences to sound contrite. His mouth dried up, though, when he saw Rasheeda sitting across from him, calm and unflappable. She didn't smile or say hello to him. Instead, she just waited while the camera started rolling. Kirk opened her mouth to reply, but Rasheeda held up her hand and muttered, "No, you have said enough. You listen now." The studio fell silent, and she said in a forceful voice, "Even though you weren't there, I gave you everything, my patience, my devotion, and my love." Kirk's head dropped, and when everyone on the planet saw what I've been going through, you were still unable to accept true responsibility. You were the victim, and you offered excuses. Kirk tried to interrupt, but I was in pain too, so she cut in. "You have no right to hurt me and then complain about your suffering, which isn't love or control, is it?" I finished it, and Kirk's eyes filled with tears again, but he remained intact. "My story is no longer up to you." The entire set of footage from that shot was never shown. Only a few clips, a few quotes from Rita, and a few of Kirk's responses were made public. Although the fan base was shaken by even those tidbits, Rita was commended for her strength and was referred to as a role model. Women from all over the country told stories of their splits and times when they regained control of Kirk, but Kirk remained silent once more. "To decide I do this is closure," she said, gesturing around the set. Emphasized personal development and healing, his team stated in a final statement that while it may have sounded like a farewell, nothing would ever be the same, and there were still more secrets that needed to be revealed. Even after Kirk's declaration was made public, the effects of his silence were still being felt by those closest to him, who knew that even though he was no longer in the spotlight, the rumors continued in private. Kirk's family was in disarray, and his oldest child in particular had been left stranded in the middle of the wreckage. Some were more candid in their assessment, especially after seeing. In a mysterious post that prompted a flurry of responses, his eldest daughter said, "This isn't just about Kirk and Rasheeda anymore. It's about a family that's been broken and how we pick up the pieces." While some fans used the opportunity to attack Kirk's parenting, others voiced their support for the children and demanded that he be held accountable for the years of suffering his family had endured. Others demonstrated empathy for their father's struggles, and Kirk was now carrying a heavy burden from his past. Leaked the shocking story that the media had learned about. Kirk allegedly attended several covered meetings with another reality star who had previously been close to the show. While the details were unclear, it was clear that Kirk was getting ready for a big comeback. His fight for a spot on Love and Hip Hop wasn't over yet. Kirk was thrust back into the spotlight when the news went viral, but this time there was no genuine apology or moment of reflection. Rather, it was a desperate, unvarnished attempt to regain what he believed was lost, allegedly working with the fired producer. From the show a few seasons earlier, rumors suggested that they were working on a new, darker plot that would drastically change how people saw Kirk. However, the damage had already been done, and no one believed in Kirk's redemption, even though the rumors grew louder and he tried to make a comeback. He was the antagonist of the story, and on reality TV, antagonists rarely got second chances. Meanwhile, Rasheeda's life was drastically changing. She started getting offers from several brands that had previously distanced themselves from her after the altercation on the show, and her social media following skyrocketed. About her personal experience, including her rise in the industry, her personal struggles, and how she had finally learned to value herself. As her fan base grew every day, not only were people taking notice, but other celebrities also began to offer their support. After everything Rita had been through, some even called it inspirational to see her not only survive but thrive. With the floods now open, people began to see her as a woman who had endured enough to write her own story of resilience rather than simply as a reality TV star. But she also had her own problems behind the scenes. Media appearances, family obligations, and exhaustion were all pulling Rita in different directions. On some days, she just wanted to shut out the noise, but she couldn't because of everything she had been through. She had stopped crying in private and wishing her husband would change. Instead, she had changed to someone more powerful, but she still showed signs of weakness. Even after she regained control, there were moments when she wondered if Kirk would ever truly suffer the consequences of his. There were moments when she questioned her capacity to handle her own new story. Rumors about Kirk's possible return to the show intensified in the weeks following the altercation, with Kirk's team reportedly in talks with the network to promote the idea that his story was far from finished. There were also rumors that the producers were considering him for a spin-off series that would only focus on his redemption arc. Rita would not have any of it. In a private meeting with her staff, she stated, "I'll leave before I allow him to pull me back into that toxic mess," but she was making decisions for herself for the first time in a long time, and Kirk wasn't the only one who influenced her decision. It was for her personal health. Kirk didn't give up easily, though, and in an attempt to boost his reputation, he went public by addressing Rita directly in a social media post. "I'm aware of my mistakes, I'm aware of my hurt, but I'm prepared to go to any lengths if there's even the slightest chance to restore what we had. I will try to make things right for the rest of my life because you mean more to me than anything else," he said. Did not respond to the post and was not even acknowledged by her. Kirk's comments seemed to her like yet another attempt to control the story. One more round of empty promises. Then, just when things seemed to be settling down, a new bombshell was revealed. A close friend of Kirk's who had stood by him throughout the entire incident revealed that Kirk had been seeing someone else while he was married to Rita. The already shattered neighborhood was rocked by the revelation, and many of the fans were devastated. Kirk tried to restore his public persona, but it was too late. After Kirk's attempt to improve his public image failed miserably, the entertainment industry was rocked by the revelation of his affair, and many began to wonder if he was really capable of changing once his supporters turned against him, accusing him of being a coward, a liar, and a manipulator. Even his most ardent followers began to question whether he deserved another chance when his social media pages were inundated with nasty remarks. Kirk's attempts to mend his marriage appeared futile after the incident, and the media storm only got worse. His apologies sounded hollow this time, even though Rita had heard them all before. She had finally come to terms with the fact that Kirk couldn't give her the level of dedication she was entitled to, and that his poisonous presence was no longer a part of the new life she had created for herself. Rita's resolve to cut Kirk out of her life was further cemented when she received encouragement from an unexpected source. Her mother, who had always doubted Kirk, presented her daughter with the unpleasant reality that she had had enough, sweetie. This suffering is not worth it. Any man, her statement was a wake-up call for Rita. He's shown you who he really is. She wanted quiet strength and independence, not Kirk's excuses or assurances. The public's opinion of Kirk worsened as his attempts at reconciliation became more desperate. Producers from Love and Hip Hop confirmed that Kirk would no longer have any significant appearances on the show, leaving him desperately trying to rebuild his broken career. Kirk's crew continued to pursue his comeback strategy after his collapse, and rumors circulated that a new series would document his road of atonement. Style, many thought the idea was just another cunning attempt to capitalize on his mistakes, even though it sounded too good to be true. Kirk's team claimed that the goal was to show the public that he could change and become the person he claimed to be, not just to make money. However, it was clear that the audience had become disinterested in his sob story because his fall from grace had been too dramatic, and Rasheeda's career was thriving while Kirk's was declining. Her commercial endeavors were still thriving, and she was being approached for high-profile partnerships as a woman who had survived a bad relationship and emerged stronger than before, and she had come to represent tenacity. Her story moved millions of followers, many of whom had experienced similar struggles in their own lives. Rita used her platform to inspire others by sharing her journey of self-love, independence, and empowerment. She became a beacon of hope for women who had been abused, showing them that they could rebuild their lives and regain control. Kirk, who had once been the face of the franchise, was now a forgotten relic from a bygone era as public interest in him declined. His social media following shrank with each post and public declaration, and he clung to the past, making his attempts to stay relevant seem increasingly hopeless. Career was now a cautionary tale, a warning of how quickly fame can vanish when loyalty and trust are betrayed. In a last-ditch attempt to salvage what little of his reputation was left, Kirk posted a video on social media that was sincere, heartfelt, and filled with regret. He promised to do better after admitting his mistakes and the hurt he had caused Rasheeda, but his remarks collapsed once more. His supporters were no longer buying it because they had seen this side of him far too frequently, and some fans moved on and showed their disinterest in. The truth was that Kirk's actions had already outshone his words, and no matter how many times he apologized or promised to make things better, he would never be able to fully restore the trust he had betrayed in Rasheeda and their family. In addition to losing his marriage, he also lost his job, his reputation, and his position in the reality TV industry. Rita, on the other hand, was on her way, more resilient, astute, and resolute than before she left Kirk and his lies behind and continued to rise above the chaos after. For a while, the media's focus shifted from their failing marriage to new scandals and personalities in the reality TV industry. But Rita had learned a valuable lesson: never accept anything less than what you deserve. The lesson was especially harsh for Kirk because atonement isn't always possible and actions speak louder than words. Kirk's violent outburst at Rasheeda was ultimately just one part of a much longer story of terrible public humiliation and the death of a once famous reality TV personality. However, once the dust settled, one thing was certain: even though Kirk may have had his moment in the spotlight, Rasheeda had finally triumphed. We are all in shock over Kirk Frost's shocking outburst and subsequent collapse, But it's clear that Rita overcame everything and demonstrated what true resilience looks like. Is Kirk's history finally catching up with him, or do you think he will ever completely turn his life around? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We'd like to know if you think Kirk's career is over, or if there is still hope for him to return for more intense celebrity news drama and the most recent. As always, turn on alerts to make sure you don't miss any updates from the reality TV sector. Also, if you haven't already, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.